90% of motorcycle crashes start with the same 4 words. I never saw it coming. You think you are scanning the road, eyes moving, head on a swivel, but your brain is not processing threats. It is just watching scenery roll by while danger closes in from every angle. There is a reason Japanese riders consistently show dramatically lower fatality rates than US riders in national transport data. And it is not because their roads are safer or their bikes are better. They are trained in something called Kiken Yosoku, hazard prediction, a protocol that rewires how your brain sees danger before it becomes a crash. This is not about faster reaction time or better reflexes. It is about seeing the crash 3 seconds before it happens and moving before the threat does. Most riders wait until something goes wrong, then react. Japanese riders predict what is going to go wrong, then prepare. That is the difference between a close call and a body bag. Number 1. What Kiken Yosoku actually is and why you have never heard of it. Kiken Yosoku translates directly to danger prediction. In Japan, it is mandatory training for every rider who wants a license. Not optional. Not a weekend course you can skip. Mandatory. Before you are allowed to ride solo on public roads, you have to prove you can verbally name every potential threat before you enter an intersection or a corner. Here is the protocol. You approach an intersection. You do not just look at the car on your left. You say out loud, "Car on left." No eye contact, wheels turned, preparing to pull out. You are not reacting to what the car does. You are predicting what it is going to do and planning your response before it moves. Contrast that with US training. We teach scan and react. Look around, see what is happening, then respond. That is a passive system. You are waiting for the threat to reveal itself, then hoping you have enough time to do something about it. Japan teaches predict and prepare. You identify the threat, predict its next move, and position yourself to avoid it before it happens. The neuroscience backs this up. Your brain does not register threats unless you consciously label them. Studies show that when you verbally name an object, your brain creates a memory lock. It cannot ignore what you have named. That is why Japanese riders point at hazards and call them out. The physical act of pointing combined with verbal confirmation forces your brain to process the threat, not just see it and dismiss it. Let us break down the difference with a real scenario. A US rider approaches an intersection. He sees a car. Maybe he thinks, there is a car. His brain files it away as background noise. A Japanese rider approaches the same intersection. He sees the same car and says, car on left, driver looking down, no brake lights, wheels angled toward the intersection, high probability of pulling out. His brain is now locked onto that car as a primary threat. He is already adjusting his speed, covering his brake, and mapping his escape path. If you cannot name it, you cannot avoid it. That is the brutal truth most riders never learn until it is too late. Your eyes see plenty, but your brain dismisses 90% of what is in front of you because you never trained it to process threats as threats. Why did this system not make it to the US? Simple. Insurance companies and the Motorcycle Safety Foundation focus on liability, not proactive prediction. They teach you enough to pass a test and get insured. They do not teach you how to survive. Japan's system exists because their government decided rider survival was more important than legal liability. Our system exists because someone decided minimizing lawsuits was more important than minimizing crashes. The system exists. The question is whether you are disciplined enough to use it. Number 2. The point and call drill. Shisa Kanko is the physical discipline behind Kiken Yosoku, point and call. It sounds ridiculous until you understand where it comes from and why it works. Shisa Kanko originated in the Japanese railway system over a century ago. Train operators were making fatal errors, missing signals, throwing the wrong switches, causing derailments. The rail companies needed a solution that did not rely on better technology or smarter workers. They needed a system that forced the human brain to pay attention. The answer was brutally simple. Make the operator point at every signal and switch, then verbally confirm what they are seeing. Signal green, proceeding. Switch aligned, track clear. The physical gesture combined with the spoken word created a feedback loop the brain could not ignore. The results were immediate. Operator errors dropped massively, by margins large enough that the system became mandatory nationwide. Not because the workers got smarter or the equipment got better, but because the act of pointing and calling forced their brains to process information instead of operating on autopilot. Japanese motorcycle training adopted the same protocol. Police riders point at cars, pedestrians, road debris. Every major threat gets a physical point and a verbal call-out. It feels stupid at first. You are riding down the street pointing at things like a tourist. But the science does not care about your ego. Studies show that when you combine a physical gesture with verbal confirmation, your brain creates what researchers call a memory lock. The information does not just pass through your visual cortex and disappear, it gets flagged as important, stored, and referenced. Your brain cannot dismiss what you have named and pointed at. Here is a real-world example. A rider approaching a blind corner at 45 miles per hour cannot see around the bend, but he knows gravel is possible. A rider trained in the United States thinks, "I hope there is no gravel," and maintains speed. A rider trained in Japan points at the apex and says out loud, "Gravel possible," adjusting entry speed. Before he even sees the threat, he is already slowed down and positioned to handle it. That is the difference. One rider is hoping, the other is preparing. This eliminates what psychologists call inattentional blindness. That is the phenomenon where your eyes see something, but your brain dismisses it as irrelevant. You have experienced this. A car pulls out in front of you and you think, "Where did that come from?" It did not teleport. It was there the whole time. Your brain just decided it was not important until it was too late. The protocol is simple. Every ride verbally call out 5 major threats per mile. Name things like a car merging without a signal, a pedestrian at a crosswalk, an oil patch in the turn, a truck with an unsecured load. It does not matter what it is. If it can kill you, name it. The resistance you will feel is your pride talking. You will feel ridiculous talking to yourself. That is not your survival instinct. That is pride. And pride does not stop crashes. The payoff comes after about 100 miles of practice. Threat recognition becomes automatic. You will start seeing dangers other riders miss because your brain has been trained to process, not just observe. But seeing the threat is only half the equation. You need to predict what it is going to do. Number 3. The if-then chain. Why reacting is already too late. Seeing the threat is step 1. Predicting what it is going to do is step 2. That is where the if-then protocol comes in. For every threat you identify, you predict its next move and plan your response. Not after it happens, before. If that car at the intersection does not see me, then I am braking hard and swerving right. You are not waiting to find out if the driver sees you. You are already planning the escape before the car moves. The Japanese standard is strict. Riders must complete 3 if-then chains before entering any high-risk zone. Intersection, merge lane, blind corner. 3 predictions, 3 responses, locked in before you commit. Why US riders fail at this is simple. We are trained to react after the threat moves. Japan trains riders to move before the threat does. That is not a small difference. That is the difference between life and death. The physics advantage is massive. Pre-planning slashes reaction time, often by over a full second. That is because you are not starting from 0 when the threat appears. You have already decided what you are going to do. Your hands and feet are just executing a plan your brain made 3 seconds ago. Real-world scenario. Car in the left lane, blinker on, drifting toward the line. A US rider sees it and thinks he might merge. A Japanese rider sees it and runs the chain. If he merges without looking, then I am already in the right tire track with throttle ready to accelerate past him. If he brakes suddenly, then I am covering my brake and increasing following distance. If he swerves back into his lane, then I maintain position and monitor. 3 predictions, 3 responses, all planned before the car makes a move. When the car does something, the rider is not reacting. He is executing. The mental discipline required for this is brutal. Your brain is working harder than your throttle hand. You are running scenarios constantly. Every car is a threat. Every gap in traffic is a potential trap. Every corner hides something you cannot see yet. Why most riders quit this system is simple. It is exhausting. Your brain is not used to this level of cognitive load. After 20 minutes of running if-then chains, you will feel mentally drained. But that exhaustion is the price of survival. The alternative is riding blind and hoping nothing goes wrong. The training drill is non-negotiable. Pick a 5-mile route you know well. Narrate every if-then chain out loud for the entire ride. Record it on your phone. When you get home, listen back and find the gaps. Find the threats you missed. Find the predictions you did not make. Then ride it again and fill those gaps. The brutal truth is this: if you cannot predict it, you cannot survive it. Every crash that starts with "I never saw it coming" is a rider who never learned to run the chain. Every near miss that ends with "that was close" is a rider who got lucky instead of prepared. Prediction is useless if your body cannot execute the escape. That is where the final piece comes in. If this feels mentally exhausting, that is not a flaw. That is your brain waking up. Most riders never push their awareness this far, and that is exactly why they never see the crash coming. Number 4. Escape path discipline. Why options matter more than skill. At all times, you must have a pre-identified out, a physical space to swerve, brake, or accelerate into, not a vague idea of where you might go if something happens. An actual escape path that you have already identified and confirmed is clear. The Japanese standard is brutal. If you cannot name your escape path in 2 seconds, you are riding blind. That is not an exaggeration. That is the difference between having options and having none. Why this is different from scanning comes down to one word: passive versus active. Scanning is passive. You are looking around, taking in information, hoping you will notice something important. Escape path discipline is active route planning. You are constantly asking yourself, "Where's my out?" and adjusting your position to make sure you always have an answer. Example: riding in traffic. Left lane blocked by a semi. Right lane has a car merging in without looking. Where is your out? If you have not already identified the shoulder as your escape path, you are boxed in. When that merge happens and the semi does not see you, you have nowhere to go. The Japanese trained rider already spotted the shoulder 10 seconds ago, confirmed it is clear, and positioned himself so he can reach it in under a second. The physics of this is simple, but most riders miss it. Crashes happen because riders box themselves in. No escape path means no options. When the threat appears, you are stuck choosing between bad and worse. Hit the car or hit the guardrail. Lock up the brakes or run wide into oncoming traffic. Those are not choices. That is failure. The stoplight trap is the perfect example. US riders roll up to a red light and stop dead center in the lane. Neutral gear, feet down, eyes forward. They are a sitting duck. Japanese riders stop offset, either left or right of center, always leaving a clear path to the shoulder. They stay in first gear, clutch in, ready to move. When a distracted driver comes up too fast from behind, the Japanese rider already knows where he is going. The US rider is about to get rear-ended. The highway protocol is just as strict. Every 10 seconds, ask yourself, "Where's my out?" If you cannot answer immediately, adjust your position. Move forward, drop back, change lanes. Do whatever it takes to create space. That constant repositioning feels paranoid at first. But the statistics do not lie. Crash analyses consistently show that riders without pre-planned escape paths are dramatically more likely to be involved in multi-vehicle incidents. That is not a small number. That is the difference between walking away and getting carried away. The training drill is simple, but most riders will not do it. Ride a familiar route, but force yourself to identify a new escape path every 100 feet. Verbally call it out. Shoulder clear on the right. Gap opening in the left lane. Median wide enough for emergency stop. Every 100 feet, a new path. By the time you finish a 10-mile ride, you will have identified 500 escape routes. The mental shift this creates is massive. You are no longer riding the road. You are managing the threat grid. Every car is a potential hazard. Every gap is a potential escape. Your brain is constantly calculating, adjusting, preparing. It is exhausting. But exhaustion is the price of control. The system is complete. The real question is whether you will actually use it. Number 5. Why you'll probably ignore this. This is the point where most riders quietly tune out. The resistance is already building in your head. This system requires constant mental effort. Most riders would rather relax and enjoy the ride. They do not want to work this hard. They do not want to talk to themselves or run prediction chains or constantly scan for escape paths. They just want to twist the throttle and feel the wind. Here is the brutal reality. Relaxation is what gets you killed. The road does not care about your mood. It does not care that you had a long week or that you are riding to clear your head. The car that pulls out in front of you does not check to see if you are paying attention before it moves. The gravel patch in the corner does not wait until you are ready to deal with it. The pattern is clear. Japanese riders consistently show dramatically lower fatality rates than US riders, even though they ride in denser, more complex traffic environments. Not because their roads are better. Japanese roads are narrow, crowded, and full of tight corners. Not because their bikes are safer. They ride the same machines we do. The difference is discipline. They refuse to ride blind. The American ego trap is the real killer here. We think skill means throttle control and cornering speed. We think being a good rider means dragging a knee or pulling a wheelie. Japan knows that skill is threat prediction. The fastest rider in the world still loses if he never sees the crash coming. The cost of skipping this system shows up in the crash reports. Every rider who says, "I never saw it coming," is a rider who never learned Kiken Yosoku. Every near miss that ends with, "that was too close," is a rider who got lucky instead of prepared. Luck runs out. Discipline does not. This is not anti-skill riding. Skill matters, but skill without prediction is just faster failure. The long-term payoff is real. After 1,000 miles of disciplined practice, hazard prediction becomes automatic. You will ride with a margin for error that other riders do not have. You will see threats 3 seconds before they materialize. You will position yourself in traffic like a chess player, always 2 moves ahead. That is not talent, that is training. Try it for 1 week, 7 days. Every ride, verbally call out threats. Run if-then chains. Identify escape paths. Track your progress. Record yourself if you have to. If you quit, at least be honest about why. But if you finish the week, you will never ride the same way again. Not because you learned a trick, but because you rewired how you see danger. The truth most riders do not want to hear is this: Kiken Yosoku is not a secret. It is just a discipline most riders refuse to commit to. The information is out there. The training protocols are documented. The evidence proves it works. The only thing missing is your willingness to do the work. Kiken Yosoku is a system. Point and call forces your brain to process threats. Then chains can cut critical reaction time by over a second when it matters most. Escape path discipline ensures you always have an out. Together, they create a rider who sees danger before it appears. This is not advanced riding. It is the foundation that separates survivors from statistics. Start with 1 drill. Point and call for 5 miles. See if you can handle the mental load. The Japanese do not have better riders. They have riders who refuse to ride blind.